So I mentioned in the last episode I'm going to try and do intros and outros, and tonight we have a special guest. You guessed it, my dog, Blue. Do you want to say hi to everybody? Blue? No, he's a little too shy right now. Anyway, so I mentioned I'm going to try and add an intro and extra. So here we go. I have not memorized it yet. Please provide any feedback. You're listening to the Rediscovery Journal, space for honest conversations, quiet reflection, and the journey back to yourself. I'm your host, Sophia, and each week we will explore what it means to heal, grow, and rediscover who we really are, one story at a time. Thanks for being here. Let's begin. So, I released an episode earlier this week based on a poll, and the topic was the evolution of friendships. There was another category that also scored the same amount of votes, and that was the topic of fear. So, we're going to talk a little bit about fear tonight. Now, Blue is scared of a lot of things. He's a very fearful boy, unfortunately. If he hears cars going by the apartment, like somebody honks their horn, he hears a doorbell, like a ding dong, he starts barking. If he sees somebody walk past our apartment, he starts barking. If he doesn't like where something is placed, he starts barking. And let's see. If he wants attention and he's not getting enough of it, you guessed it, he starts barking. So it's interesting to me that people aren't the only ones that have fear. And this specific topic is relevant to animals as well and pets. Right, Blue? Right, Mom? So, gosh. Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you. To talk about fear, I think fear comes in many levels. And the way that I kind of like to think about fear is it's kind of like a smoke alarm going off in order to warn you something bad has happened. But sometimes the smoke alarm is only going off when you, for example, burnt toast. In that example, it's not an emergency by any means, but you still had that component of fear, or those alarms are still going off to trigger that fear. So again, goes back to different levels. There's, the small level of maybe you're scared of snakes. In real life, you're probably not going to come across a snake. And if you do, odds are it is poisonous or it isn't. I don't know. I don't know too much about snakes, but it probably doesn't play a crucial role in your overall life. Then we move to medium fears, and that could be something more like the fear of heights. With the fear of heights, you might, for example, not go on a roller coaster, or maybe you don't like to fly because you have that fear of heights. And it affects your life a little bit more than your fear of snakes or spiders or insects. Then we have high level fears, which is things like the fear of death or the fear of unknown, the fear of failure. And those I feel like play a lot more of a drastic role when it comes to our overall life. Now, one reason I think the fear of failure is so prevalent in a lot of people goes back to school. And this is actually an example I talked with someone else about, I think earlier this week, but it was on a different topic. So it wasn't exactly related to fear, more so failure and trying new things. So I guess correlated. Anywho, when it comes to school, if you have a course that you fail a test in, it's seen as you don't understand the content, you really need to brush up more, you're not doing well, you failed. Versus in real life, when we fail, we look at it as a lesson. It's something that we learn from and we grow from, and it helps us to find or discover a better version of ourselves. Now, I've heard the saying, nothing, I think that this is how it goes. It's like, nothing worth doing is ever easy. And I think that goes back to fear, because most of the time, the things that we want, in order to get to that path, we have to do something that scares us or that we're afraid of. Unless you're one of those lucky people who pretty much isn't afraid of anything. I am unfortunately not one of those people. The fear of failure weighs heavily on me, and I don't know if part of that is because I'm an only child and I don't want to let my parents down. That's one of my biggest fears. I don't want their legacy to be that they had a kid and she didn't amount to much. I want them to be proud. And I'm not saying that they've ever said to me, hey, we're not proud of you or anything like that. I know that they want the best for me. I want them to know that them having me wasn't a waste. Then there's also the fear of failure for myself. I mean, I want to have a good life. I want to make a difference. I want to enact positive change where when I leave this planet, I leave it better than when I found it. I do think that in order to evolve and change and grow as a person, though, we have to do things that scare us in terms of fear. So, fear can hold us back from the best version of ourselves or the things that we want to do. And I feel like fear a lot of times leads into uncomfortableness. For example, if you're meeting a group of new people, you might fear that they don't like you or that you're going to say or do the wrong things. And that's uncomfortable. But I feel in order to grow, most of the time we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's one of those things where you have to, in order to get to the other side, you have to go through. So nothing in life is typically 100% easy. You know, life has those ebbs and those flows, those highs and those lows, and it makes up who you are. Fear of the unknown is also just a crazy topic to think because, I mean, I 100% agree. It's terrifying. And there are some moments I wish I knew exactly what was going to come next, or when I knew when different moments in my life were going to happen or come, because then I couldn't be afraid of what was going to happen next. If we knew every single moment of what our life was going to be before it happened, how is that a life worth living? It takes the fun out of life because you know what's exactly around the corner, when you're going to meet the greatest friends that you're ever going to have, if relationships that you have are going to fail. Maybe you don't even bother with them anymore because you just feel like, what's the point if it's going to fail? And yeah, that could then end up changing things in and of itself. But if you knew when the moments of your lives of good and bad things were going to happen, I feel like it can change your momentum of how you see the world. Like, what's the point of trying when you know something bad is right around the corner? Or I don't have to try that much because I know this amazing, great thing is going to happen to me on September 10th, you know, different things like that. Versus living in the unknown means that you can have all these amazing experiences that you don't expect to happen to you. Yeah, of course, everyone in their life has moments of negativity or moments that bring them down, but it's those unexpected moments of joy that really make life worth living, at least for me. An example or like a main thing I can think of is, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but I had a friend send me a care package because she saw something that made her think of me, and it was the highlight of my week getting that, because people don't have to think of you, and when they do, they don't have to let you know that or send you something just because. I don't know if part of it is fear of the unfamiliarity, but I think it's really amazing to feel or see firsthand that someone cares about you, especially when it's in a situation where they don't have to or they aren't necessarily expected to have to care about you, right? Like you would hope, or like society tells us, like, okay, yes, your mom and dad should love you. And I know that that isn't always the case in specific circumstances, but it's not always necessarily expected that friends do for friends. I think it's nice and it's great and we should definitely, but that isn't always the reality, or that hasn't always been my reality. So now I'll be at a point where someone can be across the country from me and see something and be like, oh my goodness, this is so her, and I want to give this moment or send this off to her. I think that that just shows pure friendship. And also, just so that y'all know, I had filmed this episode, or so I thought I filmed it, and then I realized that it had not recorded anything, so some of these things might come off a little discombobulated because I already spoke about it, and some of the things that I already spoke about, like my rhythm and cadence, is just not there at this point. But I think fear has a big impact in a lot of people's lives. For example, I think a lot of people my age, society has kind of told, okay, when we were at a young age, like, you need to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And so I thought I had to have it all figured out at 17. I went to school for what I thought I wanted to do. Then I started a career and what I thought I wanted to do. And now I'm at the point of pivoting and realizing that what I wanted to do isn't, or I don't think that that is actually the path for me at this point. So now, as I mentioned, and I believe episode 2 with Ellie, I'm in my pivoting area. I'm pivoting and looking at careers that I think fit who I am as a person and my transferable skills. And it's scary and fear driven because I don't know where my life's going to take me, and I feel like for every other aspect of my life I've had or tried to have a plan. And this is a moment of my life where there isn't an exact plan or correlation, planned out next step of where I'm going to be and how I'm going to get there and what I need to accomplish to get to the next steps. And if you ask a lot of people, normally they'll say things to you like, "Oh, how could you not have a plan? Everybody has a plan. You're supposed to have a plan." And I think that that's just how we learned that life should be, is that in order to do one thing, you have to do another thing that leads into another thing to get you to what you want. When honestly, I don't think life is very linear. It bounces up, down, all around. It's kind of like if you're from like the DVD ages, if you had that DVD pause long enough, it would have that like symbol kind of bounce around all over the screen, and then every now and again it would hit in that corner, but you didn't know when that moment was going to be, and it was super rare. That's how life is. You can't predict where you're going to go next. If you could, it may be a talent, because I think a lot of people I know don't necessarily know what they want for the rest of their lives and what they have to do at this point to get there. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to not have it figured out. I understand the fear in it because I'm in that fear phase right now of not knowing what's going to happen next in my life. But it's also an opportunity to push myself and see what's next around the next turn or aspect and where my life's going to take me from here. And most likely, I have more time to figure out who I am and what I want and what is the right path for me, because at the end of the day we spend so much time with ourselves 24/7, you could almost say, that the only person's happiness that should really matter is our own. And we shouldn't be living our lives for other people because we're afraid of letting them down. We should make decisions based on what's best for us. And for me, that's terrifying because I love doing things for other people. But as I mentioned, I think in another episode, I'm trying to give myself the same amount of respect that I give other people. And in order to do that, I also have to make decisions for me because it's something I want, not because someone else wants it for me or because I'm doing it to make someone else happy. I need to do things because they bring joy to me and also bring good things to my dog. Don't get me wrong, I love him. I want the best for my child. Moving past that fear and going through that fear is what gets us to the point where we can be a stronger person. We can have stronger bonds with people. We can take more risks that we weren't expecting. And I'm not saying like crazy risks like jumping out of a plane without a parachute. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend that. But when I say risks, I mean taking chances for ourselves that we once wouldn't because we were too afraid. That's a place I think that fear can very easily take people, is to a place where we don't trust ourselves. We get into these phases where we believe that what we do isn't good enough. Anywho, to talk about a fear topic, when I first started this podcast, I was afraid. I've honestly been wanting to start a podcast for a few years, but something always stopped me. For some reason the timing felt right now. And I was worried that, or I was afraid that I would put all this work into it and no one would get anything out of it. And by no one, I mean including myself. I was afraid no one would listen and I wouldn't have any growth and there would be no point in it. And I know I've only been doing it for a short while, but I feel like it's, one, given me some spark back, and two, I've had a few people reach out to me and tell me that they've actually gained good insight from these discussions, whether it's me alone in this format or with a guest, and that kind of makes it worth it. Even if I'm just impacting one person's life and it's in a positive way, then it's a conversation worth continuing to have. And I also feel like mental health and rediscovery is a topic that like isn't necessarily talked about as much as it should. I know there's a lot of good podcasts out there that they do talk about it, but there should be more. Sometimes I feel like we're made to feel ashamed for showing any vulnerability. And truth is, I think most people have a lot of fears or inside thoughts going on all the time that hold them back from decisions or doing things that they want to do. And I encourage y'all, like, do one thing that scares you this week. Now, again, going back to the skydiving thing, I don't recommend jumping out of a plane without a parachute. But even if it's a small thing, pushing yourself to become the next best version or to do something that's going to be for your greater good, I think it kind of creates a ripple effect. Because once you see the outcome and you see that that's positive, you want to continue doing things that are going to have that positive impact on your life. Now, there are some tools or methods that I've heard of to help kind of combat fear taking over you. One is naming it. So the saying is name it in order to tame it. Once you kind of come to terms with, okay, this is something I'm afraid of, you can kind of diagnose it and figure out, okay, what's the root cause behind this? Why is this something that I'm afraid of? And it takes some of the power of that fear away. Another thing is if you realize or notice that your fear is causing like an anxiety attack or a very strong emotion, you can do like breathing techniques where you really focus in on your breathing. I know in college I took this one meditation course, and so we would do this thing where we would meditate and we would just count on breathing. But when we were breathing, we were also mainly focusing on counting to 10 and keeping it at the same pace and keeping our breathing at the same pace with the numbers. And I did find that kind of therapeutic in a way, so that might potentially correlate to helping with fear. Another thing that I honestly need to get back into is journaling. Mine was more of a art journal of sorts, but if you like to write, maybe you can write about your fears and diagnose or get to the root cause of why you have some of these fears and what you think it's protecting you from. So instead of looking at moments and wondering what would happen if we changed our actions or we said something, did something different, why don't we just think about, okay, how did this lead me to who I am now? Or what if it does work out? What if this led me to the moment where things are actually going to come out in my favor? We have control, in a way, over how we feel about things. At least we have control over how we work through how we feel about things, how we express those feelings. And by being vulnerable and taking those moments to address how we're feeling and why we're feeling that, it gives us more power and the fear less power. And that's powerful. Huh, okay, I just kind of said power again, but it gives us more strength. Another thing or something I challenge people to do is this week, write or talk to someone about a fear you've been avoiding. Why do you have this fear? What does it say? What do you want to say back to it? And how has this impacted your life of where you are right now and where the trajectory of your life is currently going? And hopefully this will give you the ability to then take control in that situation and not let the fear control you. Because honestly, you're stronger than you think. I think most people are. And if you take the energy and the time to put in to make sure that you're putting yourself first and you're putting time into taking some of these negative influences out, it can have a positive impact as to where you're going to go next with your life. And also to kind of just recap, I guess, on things where I've been recommending or I've been trying to do. I'm still doing the mirror exercise every morning. I now added positive affirmations all over my apartment to remind me of the amazing parts of myself and the parts that I should really put more of an emphasis on. And now this week, I challenge you to focus on fear and, as I mentioned earlier, do something that challenges you, that you're a little afraid of. Again, not dangerous, just something that you don't feel comfortable doing, but you know it's going to push you to the best version of yourself. And I haven't come out with an outro, or I haven't decided on an outro yet, just the intro. So thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of the Rediscovery Journal. I would love to hear from people in terms of if there's any topics specifically that y'all want discussed, as well as your thoughts on any of the different challenges, if y'all have done them, if they've been helpful. I would love for y'all to like post a comment so I know if this is actually positively impacting more than just the one or two people who directly uh told me it had a positive impact on. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Have a great Tuesday or whatever day you're listening to this. Bye.